Our second scripture today is from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 65, verses 17 to 25. For I am about to create new heavens and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind, but be glad and rejoice forever in what I am creating. For I am about to create Jerusalem as a joy and its people as a delight. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and delight in my people. No more shall the sound of weeping be heard in it, or the cry of distress. No more shall there be in it an infant that lives but a few days, or an old person who does not live out a lifetime. One who dies at 100 years will be considered a youth. One who falls short of 100 will be considered accursed. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For like the days of a tree shall the days of my people be, and my chosen shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain, or bear children for calamity. For they shall be offspring blessed by the Lord, and their descendants as well. Before they call, I will answer. While they are yet speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb will feed together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox, but the serpent its food shall be dust. They shall not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, says the Lord. This is one of my favorite passages. And it comes up in the lectionary every 3 years, and every 3 years I preach on it. And if you listen to the passage that Charlie read earlier, you can see why I never picked that one. But this one, always. And of course, it falls at the same time of year, and you may not have jumped to that, but 3 years ago, this was the passage that fell immediately after the election. And it was an ugly and difficult time. It was marked by division. It was marked by a polarized electorate. The person who had won the Electoral College lost the popular vote, so there were questions about whether our system really works. There were questions whether there had been Russian intervention, and if so, to what degree that had influenced things. There were questions about the role of social media. And on top of all of that, this polarized population had two radically different visions and hopes for what the future would look like. And here we are 3 years later, and both sides look at what's happened and say, see, I told you so. And the divisions continue, don't they? We've begun the public phase of an impeachment inquiry, and it is equally or more ugly than things were 3 years ago. The process is breaking largely on partisan lines, and if you listen to the information silos, they report things so differently it sounds like they're talking about different current events. It's astounding. It's astounding. Some on the far right are threatening civil war if impeachment takes place. I've seen from multiple people said that. I've got my AR-15 and I'm ready. And there are those on the far left who are saying, yeah, I don't trust this current administration to leave office, whether they're called to do so by impeachment or by losing an election, this one or the one after that they won't leave legally. The two sides are pulling further and further apart. Further and further apart. 3 years ago, it was a foreboding time. Now it is by no means better. The Bible, I think, has a word for us in today's passage. This third section of Isaiah dates to the time following the return from exile in Babylon. It was a crazy time. It was a time that started with what anyone who looked at it with reasonable eyes thought were miracles. Persia took the Babylonian Empire without a drop of blood being shed. It's unheard of. Power doesn't get transferred from one empire to another with nobody dying. It just doesn't happen. And yet it did. And the people of Israel, the Jewish people, looked at that and they saw the hand of God working miraculously. And then another miracle happens. Cyrus becomes the new emperor, and he says to everybody whom Babylon had spread all over the world, he said, you know what? You all can go home now. You all can go home now. Their hopes, their dreams, their fantasies, all laying there right in front of them. It was a miracle, followed by another miracle. And the people who packed up their stuff and started to head home, they expected miracle after miracle. They thought, if God has already done 2, why not 3? Why not 6? Why not more than we can count? They expected to arrive home and once again experience a land of milk and honey. They expected prosperity and peace and community of support and justice. They would return to their status as the chosen people of God, and they would find their lives once again defined by and shaped by the very presence of God in their community. They saw all of that coming, and they were waiting, and they were excited, and they knew that God was working in miraculous and wondrous ways. And then they got home. But along the way, they would have sung our song that we just learned today. Miracle worker, waymaker, promise keeper, light of the world. My God, that is who you are. That's what they would have been singing. And they got there, and suddenly things didn't look quite that way. Those who had power and resources, and it's not the right word to use, I was going to say ambition, but the motivation to use their power and resources took advantage and got more of everything. The poor, who had been impoverished in time in Babylon, came home thinking that everything was going to start new. It was going to be like the year of Jubilee, and their lives were going to start out on an even keel, and it would all be good. And instead, they only got more poverty and less opportunity. They envisioned getting their ancestral homes and land back, only to discover when they got there, someone else was living in what they thought was their house, but they thought it was their house, and they've been there 70 years, and they ain't giving it up for nobody. No how. It's our house. It's our farm. The task of rebuilding a nation, of reestablishing a religious institution, all of that was harder than they ever dreamt possible. And it all felt as if it was outside of their grasp. They left Babylon with visions of what would be, and it rapidly became a dream of what never would be. It became a nightmare. They carried with them the weight of all of their problems, from the first sin in the garden all the way to the times when the rich had oppressed the poor and blamed the poor for their poverty. And they carried that all with them, and it just seemed to get worse once they got home and things weren't falling in place. If there's no hopelessness more desperate than one forged in fires of hope's unfulfilled, these were people who were defined by hopelessness. And the prophet speaks to that time. Speaks to that experience with a vision and a promise. God is at work. God is doing something new. God is doing something so wonderful. Don't even bother looking backwards. This is better. This is better. It's more beautiful than anything you have imagined. It is something new. And the prophet talks about a world where even nature is transformed. The wolf and the lamb, the only time they eat together is when one of them is on the menu. And yet, there they will be. And the ox and the lion eating grass. Lions don't eat grass. That requires something completely new and different and changed. A world where each person would enjoy the fruits of their labor, and each household would own the capital, the means of production. That's another change in the nature of the world, isn't it? A completely new society, a completely new earth, marked by joy. My people will be marked by joy, by fulfillment, by wholeness of life. And it's going to come about in such a way, even sickness will be defeated. And people will live long and rich and full lives. And Isaiah is saying to them, I know you can't do this. You can't make this happen. But God can. And God is, and it comes in and through the grace and mercy of God, and Isaiah is saying, God is bringing it to pass. God is bringing it to pass. That was a long time ago. Still hasn't happened. Indeed, there are lots of ways you can look at this world today, and you could argue that our world is less like the one that Isaiah envisioned than it was at the time Isaiah preached that sermon. We won't go through all the list. Could be here a long time. But I believe, and you can take this for whatever you want, I believe at the core of my being that God is still at work. I believe in my heart of hearts that that is the vision that God still has for this world. I believe with everything that I am that disasters, natural or man-made, that sin, however it gets lived out in the world, that God's dream, God's yearning, God's hope, God's work is birthing a new creation, the likes of which we haven't even imagined. Now, Isaiah drew that picture in agrarian terms. That was what he knew. Each one will plant their own vineyard and enjoy the fruit. Well, I know what that looks like now, because of where I live, but growing up, Cheryl would laugh at me when I met my spouse who grew up in the country, and my city boy, I thought you got one ear of corn on the stalk. That's what she did. What's wrong with you, silly person? That's not how it works. I didn't understand those things. So I needed a different vision than this. This passage becomes one that had some concrete nature for Isaiah's audience. When he talked about the lion and the ox eating grass together, they knew what that might look like. When he talked about the wolf and the lamb eating together, they knew what that looked like. They had experienced the time when the wolves came and took one of their lambs. They knew that. I have no idea. But I know what it's like to have your labor taken. I know what it's like to give your heart and your soul to an employer only to have them crap on you. I know what that's like. So, what might Isaiah's vision look like were Isaiah speaking to us directly today? What might Isaiah say if Isaiah was building this dream of a new world for us? And I have some ideas. I'm going to share some of my ideas, and then we'll see. Maybe we'll leave some time to share some. Maybe I'll just send you home that way. I don't know what time it's getting to be. Cheryl says, late. I think Isaiah would envision a time when folk across all of the political divides come together to dream a future that doesn't leave anybody behind. And it wouldn't matter if you were conservative or liberal. You'd come together and say, okay, this is what we want. Now we can figure out and we can argue about how to get there, but the end result, we're all on board. I believe Isaiah would picture a society that is safe for LGBTQ folk, that is safe for Muslims, that is safe for immigrants, that's safe for women, for rural folk who fear that their way of life is rapidly disappearing, that is safe for children who are getting up and putting their backpacks on and going to school. Isaiah would dream that. Isaiah would dream an economic system that is more equal, both in opportunity and in results. Isaiah would dream a medical care delivery system that works for all of us, so we can live rich and full lives, and that one's care doesn't depend on their zip code or their bank account. There would be more than adequate food and shelter and clothing and education for all of us. I have to say, we learned this new song this morning, and it was written by an African. And it's kind of fun because there are videos in all kinds of different styles from all over the world. And I've been watching them all this week. But the first thing I noticed was the ones from the developing world, everybody in the video was really skinny. And the ones from where I live, most of them weren't. And it's obvious why, isn't it? Some of us have way too much and some of us don't have enough. That wouldn't be in Isaiah's vision. Peace. That's simple. Peace. A care for the earth that recognizes our interconnectedness with all of creation and cares for this interconnected system of animals and plants, of water, of air, of land. As we talked about it in Bible study this week, one of our participants, as I was going over all these things, and she said, okay, that's all the big stuff, all the big systemic changes. Get that. That's easy. And I said, yeah, that's easy for me to preach on. I can just run with that. She said, what about me? What does it mean for me as an individual? What does this change, this new creation mean for you? And I said, that's a really good question. What does it mean? And she responded, I think it means that I see my neighbors. I think it means that I feel their needs, their joys, their pains, and I am connected to them. And when and where I can respond, I do so with compassion and generosity. That we, as individuals, become people who are marked by grace, by love, by forgiveness, by compassion. Because the big systemic stuff can't happen if the personal stuff doesn't happen. And the personal stuff isn't enough if the big systemic stuff doesn't happen too. They have to go hand in hand. Okay, we're not going to open the floor because we're getting there on time. But I encourage you to think about that dream. As you're doing your dishes this week, as you're driving down the street, as you're going to the grocery store, to think about, what does God dream for this world? What might that look like? And then, and this is the piece that Isaiah really didn't say in this passage, but I think I need to say it, and I think we need to say it, is that God's dream comes about as God works towards it, but God always has to put skin on that work. And that means you and I as well. That we envision all of those pieces and begin to work towards making them happen. It's not enough for me to say that people across the political divides come together with a common vision of where we need to end up at least. That means that I have to be willing to say to the folk who are not where I am, okay, let's talk. Let's understand. And let's hear where we're coming from. It means that we vote in ways that are consonant with those visions, with those dreams. It means we live our lives in ways that reflect those changes that we want to see. And God's dreams then become more and more concrete and more real as we work with God to bring them to fruition. That's where we are, I think. And that's what I think Isaiah would speak to us today.